Bethany Atkins is here and will speak for the commissioner. She will not be able to vote, however, but she will speak during the proceedings on her behalf. Is there anyone here that will be speaking on behalf of Commissioner Beal?
I mean, I can convey what she conveyed to me, certainly.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thanks, Steve. All right. Why don't we just do a quick round of introductions from the board and staff, and then we'll get into the heart of the matter. And I will begin. My name is Pat Kelleher. I'm the chair and the commissioner of the Department of Marine Resources. Roger.
Roger Burley, public member from Cliff Island.
Mac.
Mac Under, public member from Amherst.
Catherine.
Catherine Robbins Halstead, public member, Searsmont.
Bob.
Bob Myers, public member, Bath.
And Barbara.
Barbara Trafton, public member, Brunswick.
Great. And that does constitute a quorum. I don't believe I missed any other board members. At least I don't see any others on my screen. And I don't believe Jim has called in yet, so he may come in the middle of the meeting. Why don't we just have staff quickly introduce themselves? Steve.
Steve Walker, director, LMF.
Jason.
Jason Boulet, senior planner, LMF.
And Laura.
Laura Graham, senior planner, LMF, and we're recording.
Perfect, and we are recording. Thank you. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve. Are you going to kick it off, or is it going to go right to Jason?
I'm going to go right to Jason. He's prepared some quick slides for us to get the conversation started.
Okay, great. Jason, you're awesome.
Bear with me, I'll remember how to share my slides here.
Yeah, and can I just ask everybody to please mute themselves when you're not talking, please?
There we go. All right, can you guys see slides?
Yes. Yes.
All right. And I cannot see hands or chat with the slides open, so.
But I can, Jason, so
perfect.
I'll jump in if needed.
All right, so we have a full agenda today. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time rehashing how we got here. I think we're all familiar with the situation by now. But we do have two projects, the Kennebago Headwaters and Kennebago Woodlands, both of which are around 10 projects, where we discovered during due diligence that we do not have a guaranteed right of public access. So, in the past, the LMF has funded these projects. The projects that I found were BPL acquisitions. I actually did check in with Sarah Demers about just to get a little bit of context on it. The feedback I got from her was that it has been a case by case decision when there was a public benefit that justified investing the LMF money in the project. And after the last board meeting, we had a meeting, staff, LMF and IF&W staff with Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust, and we agreed on some special conditions that we could include in the project agreement dealing with public access. Some of these we talked about at the June board meeting. Some of them we did not. But first, that the public be invitees to the property. Second, this is new, that the Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust will continue to work in good faith to secure guaranteed public access to the property, and that'll be part of their project agreement annual reporting. The expectation among staff in the short term is that IF&W and LMF, to whatever extent we can help by sitting at the table, will do so. Can't put that in the project agreement because we can't really commit our successors under a different administration to that. But, you know, as long as it is current staff, we're committed to helping out however we can. Third, that Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust defends the legal rights that it believes exist over Tim Pond Road. And fourth, that if they get guaranteed public access to the satisfaction of LMF and IF&W, that there are no further special obligations under the project agreement. They, of course, remain subject to the standard conditions guaranteeing public access. So that is what we could agree to and to include in the project agreement. We could not agree to anything as far as what would happen if all this fails and the road becomes closed and the public is no longer able to access the property. So that risk remains there, and is something that the LMF board we need to decide whether to accept in funding this project. So between that and the previous discussions we've all had on this and the memo that I sent, I have nothing further to say about this. I'll open it up for discussion. I do have the two draft motions here that are the same as what was shared during the June meeting, and take it away.
Great, thanks, Jason. So I will open it up to the board for discussion. Any member of the board have anything they would like to add? And I cannot see you all, so wave your, Roger, I see your hand going up. Thank you. You are muted though, Roger. Still on mute. Oh, there you go.
Am I okay?
You're good.
Okay, well, I don't know about that, but at least I can talk. Well, I love this project in every way except one. I'm afraid that it comes to us as something that is too big to let it fail. A little variation away from too big to fail. Too big for us to allow it to fail, and I'm not happy with that. I certainly love the project. I've been there, obviously not on the whole acreage, but enough to know what it's like. And I am just gonna say that for me, this is a very, 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 very difficult no. And I'm hoping that everyone agrees with me, but if not, then there's going to be a lot of land that's going to be preserved up there. And I'm sure, go back again many times, or maybe at 80 years old, not many times, at least once or twice more. That's it for now.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Any other members of the board? I don't see any hands.
It's Barbara. Would it be timely for me to ask a question?
Very timely, Barbara. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I certainly, am on the same page as Roger, and it comes from working to support the bond that have enabled LMF over several decades. And it was always about the public access. And so I raised money and spoke to groups and spoke to individuals, and that was always the lead point and the reason for passing the bond. So this is a very, very difficult consideration for me. Before I say more, I did have one question, and I don't know if Jason wants to answer it, or if there's someone from Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust who wants to answer it. But this notion that Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust will continue to work in good faith to secure explicit deeded public vehicular access, it didn't sync with my understanding from the last meeting, which was that all options had been explored, that there had been a conversation with Luke Muzzy, that they didn't feel there was any way to work with Weyerhaeuser. They didn't feel there was any opportunity with Pingree, and they were not friendly to the idea of any declaratory judgment. So I guess I wonder, are there some other options that have developed that would allow them to pursue explicit deeded public vehicular access?
Perhaps I could answer that.
You sure, Dick? Go ahead.
I think the issue is one of timing. We have until October 15th to acquire this property, and we haven't believed, and I think we don't believe, that there's any way we can resolve this issue before our contract on the project expires. That's not to say that we couldn't continue to identify and work with the heirs of Harris and Sylvester to try to get documentation from them, whoever they are. And with more, if we had more time, in the discussion we had with IF&W, they have worked with Weyerhaeuser to get access to a pond, and that took a long time, but they did succeed in it. The only other thing I would say is that unlike I think the 5 or 6 projects that LMF has already approved, we do have deeds that give us a right of access over the 4 miles of the road where there is an explicit guaranteed public access. And one thing that I would add, that in the worst possible situation where somebody tried to gate the road, which we don't think could ever happen, we would still have the right to invite individual members of the public to come on our property under our deeded access. So the worst that could ever happen is that, and this is very unlikely, but if it ever did happen, we might have to set up like a reservation system where we would be inviting specific people to come on the property. So we have that right. There's no question about that. And I think the other projects that LMF has supported probably don't have that. So I think we're much closer to guaranteed public access than the projects that have previously been approved. The only other thing I would say is that on the 5,000 acre piece, the match is a 20%, roughly a 20%. It's an 80% match. So the state's risk is, the benefit risk comparison might want to consider that as well.
Okay, thank you, Dick. I'm going to go back to the board. I have Catherine, Bob, and then Mac.
Thank you. I am also in the no category. And I just feel with public taxpayer dollars, we cannot afford to have the risk to public access. And I would hope that there is a workaround, whether the option to purchase can be renewed while further avenues are pursued, or if there is a way. I know that in the beginning we had mentioned a chance to proceed with a yes if Rangeley Lakes would pay LMF back the funds if the restriction was ever put upon public access. And I would hope that there would be a path forward that we could go down that avenue. But unfortunately, with the risk to public access, I can't speak to prior projects, but I know I would not be comfortable with any project without guaranteed public access. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. Bob Myers. Bob, you're on mute. $5, please.
There. I've got a little different take on it. I think it's a great project, and I kind of agree with that. It's too big to let it fail. But on the other hand, I think that the Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust is too big to let it fail. I suspect that if this was some small land trust and we were running into a similar issue, that we wouldn't even be having this discussion. We would have been zapped right from the start. I agree with Catherine. I think, somebody needs to buy some time here and work their way through this. Just yesterday, I was reviewing the appraisal on the Woodland project and looking at the deed, and everybody and their brother has a right of way on the Tin Pond Road. And granted, it was Brown Company and some of the other predecessors, but there should be a way to make this happen. And I would be very supportive of tabling this until things work out. I also don't believe that Beirut has a line of buyers stacked up waiting for this to fail so they can move in and make an offer.
Great. Thank you, Bob. I've got Mac and then Bethany.
The 80-20% match is fairly telling for me, but can you remind me though how that applies to the? I believe that's only for the Woodland project, not the Headwaters. Is that correct? What's the match on the Headwater project?
Jason, can you answer that?
I should have had that number off the top of my head. It's still more than 50-50. It's maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 60-40.
Yeah. Okay. These are telling for me because, and to me, the protection of the ecological values are very important, and the public access obviously highly desirable. But there's a part of me that would be prepared to go forward with the, especially knowing that there's such, if there's a generous match involved, and so that focus on the ecological values at stake here, to me, are really important, and under certain circumstances might allow me to proceed forward with this.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mac. Bethany.
Yeah, I spent some time with Judy yesterday, just getting her take on this project. And consistent with what Mac is saying, she feels the ecological values on this project are very significant. She does have a lot of angst related to the public access here, but at the same time recognizes that in this part of the state, this is a very common issue to come across in terms of the private roads network that is the northern part of Maine, northern western part of Maine. She does feel like the plan that was put forward is a reasonable one, and that Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust ownership here does improve the public access. Overall, it doesn't get to that gold standard that we're looking for, but it does improve it, and we're prepared at IF&W to work with Rangeley to address that, achieving the gold standard piece of things. And with that, I wanted to ask David and Dick what any of the latest conversations with Weyerhaeuser or the heirs of Sylvester or research there has done, and if you have a plan sort of plotted out to how to approach those individuals.
Great. That's a great question, Bethany. David or Dick, do you have any insight there that you can share with the board?
Yeah, we've been I mean, I guess I would start by saying at the beginning of all of this, we got deeded access from Beirut over 14 miles, and we had these deeds, the Brown Company deeds, giving us public access over the 4 miles. It was a long process to figure out who actually had fee title to the bottom of the road. The town of Eustis didn't know. It hasn't been taxed. It's just there. So we had a paralegal who spent well over a month. And what we found was that there was a guy named Harrison C. Sylvester who owned 2 miles of it. And after the Brown Company Road was built in the 1960s, he sold off all the land on both sides. He then died and in the early 80s, and there's been nothing about the road in the Registry of Deeds since then. We have done an internet search, and he had a wife and he had 2 children. We don't know for sure whether the wife is still alive. If she is, she's in her 90s, and she lives outside of Augusta if she's still alive. The daughter is in Florida, and the son used to live in Kennebago, but he sold the house recently and moved, and we haven't tracked him down yet. We haven't tried to contact the widow, who, if she's alive, is in her 90s, because we didn't think there was any chance we'd get this all settled in time for our contract. But if the project is approved and we follow through with the IF&W plan, we would, complete the heir search and then try to negotiate with those heirs. They have no interest in any adjoining land. So, it seems like it should be possible to work something out with them. We also discovered from Luke Muzzy that, unlike us, Weyerhaeuser doesn't have any deeded access over the Harrison Sylvester property. So if we could get if we could get a deed from Harrison Sylvester's heirs, we could then approach Weyerhaeuser and say, you don't have deeded access to get your wood to Eustis. Let's make a deal. I think that's probably something that could be done, but I think it would take a long time. And at least our experience with Beirut is that if this contract expires, number one, we may not get another contract. If we did get a contract, the price would probably go way up. And I guess I would also just emphasize the point that there's no question that we have the right to allow individual members of the public to use the road to come to our land. So in the worst possible case, what we'd have to do would be to set up a reservation system for individuals to come on the land. And we could agree to that in the project agreement.
So Dick, could you sign all these people up as members of RHLT? Everybody for $1.
We could, but we wouldn't need to. There's no reason why we would need to. All we would have to do is operate something like North Main Wood System, where they called us and said, we want to use your land. We would say, okay, you're invited to use our land as an individual, and then they could use the land and they could use the road to get there. I mean, there's no question that we could do that.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the board. Mac?
Yes, this idea of a reservation system, although it's cumbersome, but honestly, I think when we think about the history of the road use there, the odds of ever having to go that route seem pretty darn small to me. And a reservation system, although it's, it's a bit onerous, but honestly, in the context of this area where trout fishing is one of the major attractions, and you don't want thousands of people fishing. Some constraint on public access is perhaps not a bad thing in terms of sustainability of resource.
We could agree that if somebody called up and said, I want to go snowmobiling on your property, can you put our name on the list? And we would say yes, or they could say, I want to go fish the meat hole at Little Kennebago Lake, and I have a canoe stashed there along with 50 other people. We would say yes. In other words, that's the worst thing that could happen here is, and I think it's a 1 in 100 chance or less. But if in the event that somebody put up a gate, they couldn't prevent us from inviting individual members of the public onto our property, and they couldn't prevent us from using the road to do that. So I mean, we can agree that the public will get to use this land. The issue is whether we can do that on a blanket basis. I think we can, but if it were determined that we couldn't do it that way, there's no way on earth we wouldn't be able to invite people one at a time to use the property, and we could agree to do that.
Thanks, Dick. So let me just chime in here for a second. I certainly appreciate the memo that Jason had worked out. I had talked to Steve prior to the last modification of the memo and asked them to look at other LMF parcels where there is no guaranteed right to public access. And in the interim, I also went and looked at public reserve lands throughout the state. And just a quick look at how much public reserve land is behind the gates in the North Main Woods. You can't really say that is preserved, guaranteed public access. I mean, it's a gated system. The roads are all privately owned. And while I still remain personally concerned about not having guaranteed public access, I feel like in this case we do have access, not only the Tim Pond Road, but there are other roads that lead into this particular area as well. Not guaranteed, private like many others, but I just pulled up the public reserve lands maps this morning. I mean, if you look at Scraggly Lake, you look at Chamberlain Lake, you look at Namacana, you look at the Sabumic lands, the St. John Ponds, those are all areas that you have to access over private roads with no guaranteed access in the future. So I feel like from a policy perspective, the state has already set the precedent to buy and preserve lands in this manner. Now, I have and will continue to look at them on a case-by-case basis, and did on one particular land in northwestern Maine where we were looking at a proposal to protect a very large stand of sugar bush, where really the only access was through Canada, right? And so I was a hard no in that particular case. But here I feel, because of the uniqueness of the land, the ecological importance of it, and because there is access as it currently stands that is just as precarious potentially as other access within the state. I think at this point I would be willing to be a yes vote on this particular proposal. And I think Bethany, I think correctly characterized this. This is an area of the state that has a lot of gates. more than any other areas of the state. And I think we've gone into land purchases in that area kind of eyes wide open, knowing that access is not simple in this area, but and this particular project, I think, shows that, but it doesn't say that there is no access. And as I like to say, we're not guaranteeing people can access it with a Tesla. We're saying that they may have to work at getting there, but they can still get there. So I think that's where I have landed on this particular proposal.
Pat, can I make another comment? Is it timely?
Go ahead. I've got you, Barbara, and Jim Norris has joined, so I'm going to let Jim go next. Go ahead,
Sure.
Barbara.
No, let Jim go. He hasn't spoken.
Okay, I'll go Jim and then Barbara.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry. I've got a family situation I'm dealing with, but and I'm going to share my view and then have to leave. But I'm totally satisfied with the explanations we've been given. I feel they're more than adequate. And you know, the significance of this particular project can't be underestimated. And so therefore, I certainly agree with the draft motion, and I'm pleased that there's been some agreement as to special conditions. So if you don't mind, Pat, can I leave and you understand where my vote is, or?
It wouldn't be Jim. It would not be a vote unless you were here present to vote when the motion is
All right,
made.
I'll try to stick around a little longer then. So
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I just wanted to offer a few more thoughts that have been in my mind as I've been weighing this project. Like Roger, it's hard not to love this project for all its ecological values, as Mac pointed out. And yet, when I went back to the scoring, which thank you for providing that, without the 5 points for access, the ecological values didn't make it rise above 80. So that was interesting for me. Pat, you've talked about some of the other properties. It's hard to go back there and analyze each of them, but I was just in Namacanta last year, and one of the things that strikes me as very different for some of those properties is that there seems to be a Northwoods organization of all the landowners who have a road agreement and take care of the roads, and so they have a working relationship, whereas in this case, you know, there is no road agreement. Maybe Attorney Spencer can tell me there could be a road agreement, but short of a deed, would be a different kind of agreement. But, you know, and then just one final thought I had, maybe I'm too respectful of legislative intent, but I am reminded that just this past session, they said again how important community access is, and access, you know, for large groups of people from urban centers and so forth. So I do think that's a reminder that for these particular funds, public access has a higher priority. And having done a lot of fundraising for conservation projects, as we all have, I'm sure, I'm well aware that not every source, you know, is appropriate for every project. So not every project will qualify for forest legacy. Not every project will qualify for community forest. Not every project will qualify for a Sewell Foundation grant, and so forth. Private donors, private foundations, and government grants all have their particular emphasis. And again, getting back to my earlier point, for me, for decades, the real priority purpose for LMF funds has always been guaranteed public access.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. We between the last meeting and this meeting, we've had a very thorough debate over this issue. Is there any member of the board who would like to make a motion?
What are you trying to get?
Judy wanted to call in.
So hang on just one moment. I think you want to explain what you're trying to do.
Yeah, sorry, I just got a text from Commissioner Camuso and she would like to call in, so I just need to get her the number. I'll be 1 minute.
It's Laura, do you have that handy? I have my whole slide taken up, our whole screen's taken up with the slides.
What is it you want, Jason? Commissioner Camuso's number?
No, she's texting with Steve. She wants the call-in number so she can call in for the vote.
Oh, the call-in number. Oh my gosh. Okay,
Steve
yeah.
is not right. Is not
Gotcha.
right here. Is he gonna be able to find it easily on his email?
Well, I will just send it to. What's the easiest way to get it? I've sent it everywhere. Who should I send it to, or should I just read it out loud right now?
Just forward it to Steve's email.
Okay, got it.
Okay, why is there any other, while we're waiting, is there any other comments from members of the board? I saw Jim is prepared to make a motion. Jim, why don't you make the motion while she's calling in, but we will hold on the vote until that time.
Okay, thank you very much. I move that Land for Maine Future confirm funding for the Kennebago Headwaters and Kennebago Woodlands projects with existing public access, subject to the agreed upon special conditions.
We have a second from any member of the board present.
I'll second that.
Was that Roger?
No,
That is Mac.
Mac. So we have a motion. We have a motion by Jim Norris, seconded by Mac Hunter. While we're waiting for Commissioner Camuso to come in, is it possible, Jason, for you to read the special conditions that are referenced in the motion?
Sure, that is these special conditions that were on the previous slide. First, that Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust will invite the general public to access and use the property for outdoor recreation as invitees of RLHT. Heard also from Attorney Spencer that we could add some language about inviting individual members of the public if necessary. Second, that RLHT will continue to work in good faith to secure explicit needed public vehicular access to the property and will report to LMF and IFW annually on the status of these efforts. Third, that RLHT will defend its right to allow the public to access the property over Tim Pond Road. And fourth, that if RLHT secures acceptable guaranteed public vehicular access for outdoor recreation, it will have no further special obligations regarding public access.
Okay, thank you. Do we have Commissioner Camuso yet?
She has the number. I don't know if she's dialed in yet though.
While we're waiting, we do have a motion on the board that references the special conditions. The special conditions have been read into the record by staff. Are there any other comments from the board?
Pat, Commissioner Camuso.
Oh, Commissioner, thank you for joining us. We're in the middle of discussion of a motion. The motion has been made and seconded, and the motion is to confirm funding for the Kennebago Headwaters and Kennebago Woodlands project with existing public access, subject to the agreed upon special conditions.
Great.
The special conditions, which I believe you're aware of what they are, were just read into the record. So I'm looking for further comments. I am going to go to the public for comments before I call the question. But before I do, is there any other comments from the board? I am not seeing any hands from the board. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this motion? Not seeing any hands. Staff, do you see any hands?
Nope.
Well, we do have one hand.
One. Yeah.
Sarah McDaniel. Sarah, the floor is yours if you'd like to make a comment.
I'm just going to be very quick. I'm an attorney. I practice throughout the state, and I represent a lot of land trusts down here in the greater Portland area, as well as land conservation organizations up in the North Woods. And I think that it is very important that the access that this project has, as I understand through Dick Spencer, is actually pretty good access. So I do hope that the board members will vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Seeing no other hands from the public, I'm going back to the board for final comments.
Pat, would you like me to convey Commissioner Beal's thoughts on this?
Yeah, please, Steve, if you would.
Yeah, sure. She and this is just very boiled down. She certainly understands the risks, but she is comfortable with the risk of the road being gated. She believes that the ecological values of the project certainly outweigh those risks, and she acknowledges the past precedent set by BPL purchases where similar access was approved.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Because we have a split, based on what I believe will be a split vote based on the comments, what I'd like to do is a roll call vote. And Laura, if you would read the names or call the names of the board members present, ending with the chair. And we'll call for everybody's individual votes and tally them up that way.
I will definitely do my very best here. Okay, Bob Myers, how do you vote? You're muted, Bob.
No.
Okay. Put on my list. Jim Norris, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mac, how do you vote?
Yes.
Catherine, how do you vote?
No.
Barbara, how do you vote?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Roger, how do you vote? I'm sorry, Roger, how do you vote?
No.
And Commissioner Camuso, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Commissioner Kelleher.
I vote yes. Based on my count with the members present, the vote is 4 yes, 4 no. So the motion fails for lack of a majority. So that will conclude the voting on this particular issue. And so I think from a process standpoint, that automatically will withdraw funding from this particular proposal.
Or does it remain approved under standard conditions so that if they were able to secure public access, that the project could proceed?
That is a good question.
May I make a motion to that effect?
You may. I think Jason is correct. As I'm thinking about that, I think that Jason is correct. So Roger, you can feel free to make a motion on that.
And I'll second that motion.
Roger, you're on mute. So Catherine is clairvoyant and knew what you were going to say. You're still on mute, Roger.
I move that if the special, I've lost my train of thought here, but if anything, wait a minute, this is.
While you're thinking about that, Jason, why don't you say what you said earlier? Because I think that's what's prompted Roger's motion.
Yes, I think what I said is that the project would remain funded. Both projects would remain funded in their current status, subject to standard conditions.
No, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Roger.
Yes, I move that if the conditions change, that we go back to the vote and look at it a second time and vote a second time if the special conditions are met. I don't think that's good enough. We need public access, and if it can be gained, I'm a total loud yes vote.
And that would be the standard condition, just to clarify. So when we say subject to standard conditions, that would be prior to receiving funding, they would demonstrate public access.
Yes.
Okay, so we need clarity on the motion. So the clarity that, so Roger, the motion, because the way you described it is that they could come back to us if they have guaranteed public access, but the way Jason is saying it is the project is funded assuming standard conditions, which include public access, are met.
Yeah, I'm saying the board has already made those motions at previous meetings and voted to move these projects forward. So, if there is a chance that those conditions can still be met, that the projects can stay in their current status.
Yeah, in which case we actually wouldn't need a motion because that's the status that it is in right now.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And Pat, can I ask the timing on that? So if it stays with standard conditions and they can be met, I'm just wondering, this is a lot of money, so I'm just wondering how long that money is in limbo.
Well, by policy, we usually have roughly 2 years, if I remember our policy correctly, Jason.
I think that's correct. It's 2 years, and I can't remember offhand if that is 2 years from the selection as a finalist or 2 years from the confirmation of the final award. Laura, do you know the answer to that?
I do not. I was just wondering the same thing, Jason. I do not.
I know has been our practice that, and we've often waited longer than 2 years to do this, that at some point we ask the board to renew it and extend its award if no progress has been made, or to withdraw the funding if no progress has been made. But I think 2 years from initial selection as a finalist as a minimum, or 2 years from confirmation of the final award, one or the other.
Yeah, we can confirm and get back to the board.
Yeah, I mean, the board has some flexibility there if we wanted to deal with that in a different way. But right now, the policy, I think, has been clear. And then based on conversations with the applicant, we've certainly, as a board, extended that time frame. So we do not have a motion on the table right now. Well, I'm going to back up here. We had a motion on the table. Catherine kind of jumped the gun a little bit and and tried to second it before it was read into the record. So technically it was not seconded, but Catherine, I'm gonna open the floor to you just so you can clarify where your position is on this. I would say right now we do not have a motion unless we want to revisit and refine what Roger had said.
I can withdraw my second. What I was looking to do was to agree to revisit the project if guaranteed rights of public access were acquired. And that was my belief of what Roger's motion, when he had said that, that was my understanding. That's what I was seconding. But it sounds like we do not need that. So I can withdraw that second. But that was my intent.
Okay, I think it's because of the lack of clarity of where we were and the fact that the motion had not been made and spelt out to the board before you seconded it. I'm going to say that that was not a valid motion or second. So at this point in time, there is no motion on the floor. Bob Myers, you had your hand up. It is now back down, but do you have a comment, Bob?
Well, I supported this, and I was thinking along the lines of tabling this, but thinking back, I can think of a couple of projects that have been around or were around for 2 or 3 years before the board decided to pull the plug on them. And I suspect, somehow this is going to work out. And so I was going to suggest a tabling motion, but I don't know if we really need it.
I would say it would be premature now, or too late actually, for a tabling motion, because unless we wanted to revisit our prior board decision. So right now we have already allocated funding for the headwaters and woodlands based on the outcome of our standard conditions, as Jason laid it out. So that is currently where this proposal stands, unless the board wanted to make a motion to make some changes here. I will ask the question to the board. Is the board comfortable with our earlier decision based on the standard conditions, which would include the verification and guaranteeing of public access?
Can I speak, Commissioner?
Please, Barbara.
So my answer is yes to that. And I just have a question. If it's 2 years from whichever date we decide, and if our RLHT did a bridge loan or something and was able to close on this in October, but subsequently during this 2-year period was able to get guaranteed public access, would they still be eligible for this award?
I would say yes, but I'm going to look to staff to make sure I'm not missing anything.
That would be my understanding as well. So just to reiterate, the current status of these projects, the first project, the Kennebago Headwaters, is a $1 million LMF award that has been confirmed. That's a final award. The appraisal has been accepted, and $1 million in LMF funding has been confirmed, again, subject to standard conditions. So from my perspective, unless the board tells me differently, if they meet the standard conditions and demonstrate public access, that project can proceed to closing. It's been pre-acquired. We could disperse LMF funds to reimburse them for that purchase as soon as that condition is met, and of course the project agreement is drafted and so on. The Kennebago Woodlands project has been selected as a finalist, but has not had the appraisal accepted or received a final award. They have submitted an appraisal, and I think I could use guidance from the board as to whether you would like to proceed with reviewing that appraisal at this time, or if you'd like to not take up that appraisal and make a final award unless and until public access has been guaranteed.
Barbara, did you want to follow up on that before I call on the other board members?
Well, yeah, my question was answered. My question was if our LHT is able to move ahead and show us guarantee public access, this award would still be possible even
Yeah.
after they close.
Okay, thank you. I have Jim Norris and then Bob Myers.
Yes, I would hope that we can continue to act upon the appraisal, which I happen to be looking at almost as we speak. I think it would be diligent for us to do so.
Yeah, thank you. Bob?
Yeah, I spent 2 hours reading that appraisal yesterday. So I would be in favor of just moving forward, and it would basically be the same scenario that we're dealing with here with the headwaters.
Yeah, I agree. We shouldn't, obviously, I mean, it's an approved project based on standard conditions, so we would not change the
I don't think
process
we want
by
to
how
slow
we
it
would.
down.
Yeah, exactly. We're not saying we're slowing it down. It would follow the same process as any other project would from here forward.
Mr.
Okay.
Kelleher,
Yes, Judy.
I would support that. I just want to go on the record as saying I would encourage the project to keep moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think the board has clearly articulated its position during this meeting. And so unless there is anything else to be brought before the board, a motion to adjourn would be in order. Jim Norris.
Yes, Pat, could you summarize what would be necessary for this to, at least from a parliamentary procedure standpoint, for this to be considered again? Would someone who voted in the negative have to have changed their mind or feel that there's additional evidence that that would in fact create a situation where it could be voted upon again?
That's correct. You would need to have somebody who voted no to reconsider the motion and ask for reconsideration.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have the staff have anything else besides just highlighting the upcoming meetings?
That's all that we have left.
Okay, so for the board and members of the public, you can see that we've got the next AOC meetings coming up in August and September, with the next full board meeting on September 28th. Bob, your hand is still up. Is that an old hand?
Oops, that's an old hand. Never mind.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, I think we've concluded our business here today for this LMF special meeting. A motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
So move.
Motion by Bob, seconded by Roger. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for your time. This is I know this is a kind of a tough issue, and we're all looking at it in very different with different lenses. But I thought it was a very good discussion made on both sides. So I appreciate everybody's time, and let's see where we end up as we go through the due diligence of this particular project. So thank you very much, and enjoy this great day.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks.